This is episode 3 of the Nerd Academy Movie Club podcast. I am your host, Jarod the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs, and joining me, as always, is the one and only Devin Armel. Hello there.
Ooh, happy to be here. Let's go.
Yes, we are kicking off Ryan Coogler month. Holy shit. I underestimated. I don't want to say I underestimated. I wasn't exactly prepared for how intense.
I agree.
Our entry this week was. I knew it was going to be heavy. I knew the subject matter. I wasn't super familiar with the story itself, but I was familiar enough to know this is going to be a heavy one. I wasn't quite ready for how heavy. We are, of course, talking about Fruitvale Station, directed by Ryan Coogler, starring Michael B. Jordan. You're going to notice a trend this month with that combo. And yeah, if you are a patron and you're hearing this the week of release, you know to also go back and watch the movie with us. It's on Netflix. And listen to our audio commentary, which is mostly the sound of Devin and I just sighing in pain and sorrow for most of it. I mean, not to joke, because I'm being very serious. And most of the audio commentary is just us grunting and sighing. Because the movie kind of speaks for itself. That said, Devin, you got some numbers for us up top.
I do have some numbers for us. Movie came out July 12th, 2013. It has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's justified. It has a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb. I also feel like that is justified. The movie was on a budget on $900,000, and between global and domestic earnings, it's right around $17.5 million at the box office.
This is before Michael B. Jordan was a household name.
Yeah.
And this is before Ryan Coogler is the man who brought us a Rocky reboot and Black Panther. You know, this is before Coogler was a household name either. So a smaller budget and smaller returns are not surprising. This was an indie darling. We were talking earlier. It made a killing at Sundance. I believe it won Best Picture at Sundance.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, cool. And you want to do a quickie rundown on some of the awards?
I would. Also, I'd like to say that Forrest Whitaker was a producer on this film, which I think is like so cool. Yeah, but we have the Independent Spirit Award for Best Feature Film. We have the Gotham Independent Film Award for Breakthrough Actor, Michael B. Jordan. We have the Producers Guild of America Award, which went to Forrest Whitaker, Ryan Coogler, and our other producer, Nina Yang Bonham. Hope I didn't say that wrong. The Satellite Special Achievement Award for Breakthrough Actor, Michael B. Jordan. The Bingham Ray Breakthrough Director Award, Ryan Coogler. The NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Independent Motion Picture. That was a long one. The New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Film, Ryan Coogler, and the Uncertain Regard Avenir Prize, also Ryan Coogler. So, I mean, across the board, people really like what Ryan Coogler did with this movie.
Kind of disgusting it did not get like mainstream award love. I don't know if it has any of the nominations listed, but like, how does this not have an Academy Award or a Golden Globe?
Man, we were talking about this, but like, as far as pacing of the film goes, thinking back now, like, Michael B. Jordan just carried it. Like, he knew what the role was. He knew what the job was. He knew he would be in 96% of this movie. Yeah. And a lot of it, he's not even saying shit. He's just there, and he humanized this character so much. And I'm sure part of that's the script and part of that's Ryan, but like, as far as like performance goes, top notch. Like, congratulations to Michael B. Jordan for all the awards that he won.
Well, and I think that's a really good point that I just want to immediately hit right now. For all intents and purposes, and I said this multiple times during our audio commentary, like I was 10 when this happened, and 14 when this really heavy indie movie came out, So, and you're like what, 2 years younger than me?
Yeah, I was 8 whenever it happened. And then,
Yeah,
like
8 and then
12.
12 when the movie
Yeah.
came out. So this wasn't exactly something that would have been on our radar either when the historical event, that's what I'm going to call it, whenever the event happened, and then the movie about it, completely beyond our scope of understanding of whatever.
Yeah.
So going into this movie, even though we were alive for it, this is not an event you or I lived through. So what Michael B. Jordan has to do here is bring to life somebody who is ostensibly a historical figure.
Yeah.
He has to bring to life somebody who a lot of people know about, but do not know. And that on its face is so incredibly impressive that it takes this person who, the phrase is thrown around a lot. Like, I don't want such and such to become a hashtag where, and this, again, when this happened, we weren't quite where the legs that have grown onto movements to try to prevent this kind of heinous behavior existed yet. So seeing somebody who is more an idea than a person to most people turned into such a person by this movie, it's like, I don't say 100% because, like you said, there's credit to go around here for the crafting of a character. But my God, he's so human and just such a person. And it's one of those moments where, like, for a little bit, you kind of forget you're watching a movie. You and I are, suckers for certain things. So there'll be a bit that's like really well shot. And you and I kind of remember, it's like, oh, movie. And like, there's that part of us that just gets excited to watch a movie that remembers we're watching a very well crafted piece of art.
So intentional with like the smaller characters, maybe like not characters, but like elements of the film. Like you'd brought up sound design several times, and like those like the little sounds that you hear at the beginning of moments, or maybe like the abrupt sounds you hear whenever like, oh no, and then there's he gets shot, moment of just silence, followed by him just saying like, you just shot me. Like as if seeing it wasn't enough, hearing him just realizing it and being like, how? Or like, are you like,
you shot
and
me?
then like no audio other than him saying that. And then like, you hear like the screams of the other people and things like that. But like so intentional, like making notes of like the little shots going on that Ryan Coogler would put on, like holding it, particular whenever they got on right when they got on the train, like Oscar and his friends, and then just lingering on that stairwell, seeing the train going on the one side and the reflection of the train going on the other side, just lingering.
Yeah.
It builds something inside me emotionally that is, I don't know, maybe it's suspense, maybe it's like, I know this is going to happen. I don't really want to watch it, but I do want to watch it. And like,
yeah, well, and the two things I want to touch on that, and this is something we brought up in the audio commentary. The first thing, and like, it's almost like Titanic, or to a lesser extent, but it's the most recent one I can think of, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where you go into the movie knowing what's going to happen and knowing that that's the ending. Like, that's how the story ends. The story ends in tragedy. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, granted being the odd man out here because the whole point of that movie is this hilarious subversion of expectations. And oh no, that horrible murder doesn't happen. It's stopped because of Brad Pitt tripping balls and Leo DiCaprio and his goddamn flamethrower. Here, you get in, and the movie. It immediately, like, even if there's somebody who walks in who would have walked into the theater in 2013 or put on this movie on Netflix not knowing what they were doing, and the fact that the movie immediately starts with cell phone footage, and it's that establishment at the very top that goes, this is a true story. This man was shot and murdered in cold blood. Buckle up. And I think it's smart that they do that. I think that it's very deliberate. It tells you from the beginning that we are hurtling towards tragedy. And it makes the viewer take that deep sigh, take that deep gulp every time Oscar has like a cute moment with his daughter, or he's just being so aggressively funny and charming. We see the softer moments between him and his girlfriend, and we made a joke about it, but it's the little things, like the moment where like they just decide to get it on at the grandma's house. It's little moments like that where he's like, I'm embarrassed that I lost my job. I kept it from you because I was humiliated and I wanted to try to undo it. That's not an option. All I can do now is come clean to you. I'm sorry. And it escalates into her realizing like he's just really hurting right now. He's embarrassed by this. He feels like he's failing her. And it's just how human this guy is. And then that human moment of just like the passion completely taking over. And we made a joke, it's, mom's getting railed by Killmonger while grandma and the little girl are watching Oprah. But still, that's just kind of the simplicity of the beauty and the simplicity of the way the story's told, is that you get to accompany this man during his last day on Earth, and it's chilling. Like the little moments, like they make your heart warm, and then you immediately get a chill down your back. Because that there's no stopping the tragedy we're hurtling towards. And I'm probably wrong about this. That idle humming and buzzing we hear periodically through the movie, I want to know what the dimes to donuts are, that's a train.
Ooh.
And that sound is warped.
Ooh.
And the only reason that like immediately came to mind was because like the talking about on Nerd Academy last week, whenever this is on the main feed, with the Falcon and the Winter Soldier trailer, and how I was looking at a bunch of trailer breakdowns, and people were talking about how there's kind of that like that screaming that happens in the Winter Soldier's theme, and how that like that sounds like really like mechanical. That's the composer screaming in his sound booth. And then like warping the sound over and over and over and over again to get that like mechanical shriek to sound like a voice trapped in a machine screaming to be freed. It almost sounds like, and to me, that like idle hum kind of sounds like the sound of the train coming to a halt, warped and warped and warped and warped. Because there's not a lot of music here. There's not a lot of score. And it's almost, and I Ludwig Göransson gets compared to Hans Zimmer a lot, especially because of Tenet. So it kind of, and I'm going to do it again. It had that like Zimmerian, like humming that like The Dark Knight and Inception are so known for. And I'm kind of convinced that's what that noise is.
I'm curious, like to say the least.
Yeah, and and again, like we did the audio commentary, we're jumping right into the review. So I really badly, like I'm going to look that up, and whenever the episode comes out, come back with like an answer to that, but I'm fairly certain that might have been a train. And if it is, but it's an amazing decision artistically. I want to talk about the dog.
The dog.
I want to talk about the dog.
All right, let's talk about the dog.
So
Dog
I think
is-
there's a very deep metaphor here. So there's like the whole, common misconception that like genetically pit bulls are a more dangerous breed than like a beagle because they're bigger. And because they're bigger, you see people harm pit bulls and turn them into attack dogs. But the assertion becomes the pit bull is inherently a more aggressive dog and is more likely to become an attack dog. That misconception, that whole idea, among far right circles and people who are into nonsense like eugenics, have ascribed the same beliefs onto Black people. And that, there have been, leaked chats and things where the term pit bull is very clearly being used in lieu of other words, names, phrases, types of people. I feel like, and again, like I feel like I've earned, like, I get one. I'm looking way too into this for a metaphor.
It's a good one though.
Review. And again, maybe this is a part of Oscar's story. Maybe like part of his day was he was there for this doggo in his final moments and got to like be his friend while he passed. If that is not something that explicitly happened to Oscar the day leading up to his murder, there's no way Ryan Coogler is not projecting the assumption of being inherently more dangerous and predatory and the senseless violence that kills the dog onto Oscar. And that like Oscar's like almost witnessing a precursor to what's going to happen to him. Almost. And that like maybe it's supposed to be a deconstruction of that really ugly and racist trope of, comparing Black people to animals, which I feel like I'm doing right now, and that's not my intent.
I don't think that's your intent.
But it's the nature of there being people who, Black people are predisposed to this, that, and the other thing. And it's utter horse shit and hogwash. And anybody with a brain the size of a piece of pepperoni knows that.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I looked it up.
Okay.
In the film, the dog Oscar meets is a pit bull, which is no accident. According to his family, Grant wanted to find a house in part because he wanted to get a dog, specifically a pit bull. So as far as the metaphor goes, I think it works, especially how he like just gets hit by a car and like
it's senseless violence.
Senseless. No one stops and checks. He's left there in the street.
Yeah. And it's carelessness. It's the carelessness of that driver that kills the dog. And it's the carelessness of the cop that gets Oscar killed. Like, again, going off of the cop's story, he reached for his gun instead of his taser by accident. So, like, let's take that bullshit at face value. It was carelessness and not paying attention that cost Oscar his life.
If it's true.
If that's true, and that's not utter hogwash, which it probably is. So, and look at the driver. He was being careless, or it was a piece of shit that said the hell with it and just fishtailed to hit the dog.
Yeah, and even after, Oscar goes running down the street, like, guy doesn't stop. Guy doesn't do anything. Guy just drives away. I think.
But I do like that they gave the like that moment to Oscar of like the dog that he wanted in the real world. And like I said, that may not be Ryan Coogler's intent to kind of like throw a deconstructive punch at that like weird bit of eugenics, but that was my impulse when I saw that, and that's what he was trying to kind of attack with that moment, and let it be a moment of really grim foreshadowing of
Yeah.
that to come.
In the same day too.
Yeah,
Like, and like, it's hard going, not hard, it's nice, it's smart going with scenes from, the dog, or him being fired, or rather not getting his job back, and seeing all of these different, many, many, many levels of Oscar. Going back to seeing him incarcerated, and like his mom coming to visit, and like the altercation with that guy who ends up being way more important than I ever thought, as being the guy that recognizes him on the train and starts, the whole scuffle, jumping him and everything to begin with. Like, how full circle it feels is so intentional. And ending with him, being with his family, and like potentially male role models, his whole, like, his grandma, like everyone's there. And like, you see Oscar's family, and then, the conversation with his mom about taking the train. And it's all just so nail on the head, direct with what is going to happen, but it's also such a big world builder for just like this one person. And
yeah,
like,
yeah,
which I feel like is so, because he was a real person, I feel like that means this was done so much better. Not because he's a real person that it was done better, but like, because it was done so well, I feel like I knew Oscar. I
yeah.
didn't, I don't. But whenever like to the point of whenever like he's questioning the officers and shit like that, trying to like calm his friends down, but also being like, don't fucking do this. Like, you're wrong, but also like trying to comply with what they're telling him to do. It's like,
Yeah,
I didn't question any of his actions or any of his intentions in that moment because of what I've seen from him so far.
yeah. I love that. That scene again is there's so much in that scene where he is complying, but he's also going, "You're out of pocket." And when he's asked to do something, he does it. And again, like, and let's get one thing out of the way up top here. There's no they should have complied here. No. There's none of that.
Nope.
The lunatic cops who come out here and start brutalizing Oscar and company. There's no scintilla of this where he's wrong. He wasn't even wrong in the altercation to begin with. It was
No.
this lunatic he was locked up with who swung on him on the train. And again, let's also call attention to this. Both while he is locked up and on the train, at no point does the corrections officer or the actual cop go after the white dude who hit him.
No.
Or in prison, the guy who picked the fight.
He's hiding on the train whenever like his friends are first put up against the wall, and then the cop seeks him out.
And also, and here's another neat thing. They're not neat, but like, food for thought again is, all of these characters are based on real people. And there's something about it in the movie. It's a lot easier to pick the guy who attacks Oscar out of a crowd than it is to pick Oscar out of a crowd. Like the dude has a red hat. He has hella tattoos. Like he's a very like distinct guy. Look at Oscar. He's just a dude in a hoodie and jeans.
Doesn't matter.
Like Oscar is more likely to be able to blend into a crowd than the guy who attacked him. Because he's all tatted up and has the red hat, but he somehow is able to just slink back into the train and hide.
Well, I think
and also
There's a
tries to do
quick
the same
insert shot
Sorry.
of them going into the next cart. Like his
Yeah.
attacker and like the guys that were also jumping Oscar, like they were able to get into like the next train cart in general, which, cowardice, run away and shit like that. But that's
Yeah. But
whatever.
even then, like the guy was still, they were still looking through the train cars and shit. And there's that. And again, whenever they're in prison, the corrections officer gets in Oscar's face. Not the guy who came through and said, "I'm going to kick your ass and then fuck your mom."
He asks him if there's a problem here.
Yeah, like he comes through. Is there a problem here? He's in Oscar's face, not this prick. It's subtle things like that are just it's all boiling down to the problems that this system has. And again, we're gonna say it now, and I don't even think we mentioned it during the audio commentary, but it bears being said now. Devin and I are both white men. The odds of us having to deal with anything like this are
Pretty slim.
next to zero.
I think a lot of white people are gonna be uncomfortable watching this movie.
Absolutely.
Because it's so accurate to like what's going on in the location in 2008, what's going on in Oscar's life in 2008, what's going on, like just like the language that they use, and like I don't know, the housing, the money, the jobs, all of it. And like I never would have guessed he was 22, man. Like, not that Michael B. Jordan looked old or anything, but like 22, all these like mature concepts, like a child. He's already been incarcerated once. Like, damn. And he's only 22. You're 22. I'm 20. Like,
yeah. That's what I said. Like in the audio commentary, when we get to the credits, I like out loud went, "Holy shit, he was the same age as me."
Yep. Totally different life.
Yeah. The world and rules are different. That's what privilege is, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, that the again, and like you were saying, like this is some of the most conversational dialogue I've ever heard in my life. Like there was never at one point, and again, everybody performances are just they're on 11 the entirety. But there wasn't a single amount of dialogue that didn't sound like somebody wasn't just a normal person. Like that. Then that was the kind of shit that made me forget I was watching a movie. Until there was like a really cool transition or a really good shot that like made the guy who likes movie lizard brain kind of kick on and go, "Ooh, pretty shot," and just like completely forget what I'm watching for a split second to just marvel at the cinematography or go, "Ooh, sound design's really cool here. Ooh, I like the way this is mixed." Aside from those very brief moments, it felt like I was almost watching a documentary or something.
Yeah, I mean,
everybody's just so natural.
It was so natural, and it was so consistent with like being very selective with the sound design, being very selective with like holding duration of shots, being very selective with the lighting, I feel like, going on as well. And like having those really intense moments where you have 8 or 9 characters, yelling, frustration, and then you also have those moments of like maybe just 1 to 0 people talking, and it's just like this environment, like take in the environment that you're probably not used to and try to understand like actually what's going on. Like, God, just like when his mom was just like walking down the hallway to like with the doctor to see his body, like just silence, just like the pure sounds of the train whenever you're on the track. No music for a lot of conversations, just I don't know, it hits harder that way.
It does because, and I'll be careful with how I phrase this because I don't want to send the wrong message. There is with anytime you try to tell a story on film, there is an inherent exaltation and glorification of the content.
Yeah, like romanticizing it or
Yeah,
whatever.
and I don't think anybody wants this story to be turned into like pulp. And I think that there are subtle ways of telling these kinds of stories that guarantee that there is no misunderstanding, that this is not telling this guy's story in like, like in the kind of way that like somebody would like criticize a true crime podcast, of like,
Mhm.
well, this is just pulp to make people's most base, you know, impulses start to feel something. Like you get that rush of like, the blood and the guts and the details and who was having an affair with who. And that here, there is none of that. There is no music. Again, there's so little music. It just feels so real. It feels like a documentary in the way that it is shot and presented, that I have a hard time remembering it's a movie. And maybe part of that documentary aspect comes from, like I said earlier, this isn't a story you or I are familiar with because we were 10 and 8 when this man was murdered, and 12 and 14 when the movie was made. So there's a part of it that I am learning so much about this man as we go, because I went into this knowing dude named Oscar was murdered at a train station, bad police shooting. There's such a thing as a good police shooting. Killed by a cop, adapted into a movie, Ryan Coogler, Michael B. Jordan. That's all I knew going in.
Pretty much base understanding.
Yeah. I knew it was incredible. I knew how highly it was rated on Rotten Tomatoes. I know how well I've never seen a bad review of this movie. I went in knowing this was an incredible piece of art. I did not go in knowing the facts about this man's life and the tragedy of the ending of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a part of it that this feels feels like a documentary for me for that reason.
Yeah, I feel like it's because it is so grounded. It's tonally fluent. It's like I felt like I was there, especially given the circumstance that like we're viewing what's happening through a camera, and like there were so many people before me who have also viewed these events through a camera. I feel like that also was like a big part, not only in like the grounding, but also like the documentary-esque feel with it. I don't know if there's much more I like have to say about this movie. Like the intentional little things between the sound designs, the shots, very specific cuts. There was only one jumpy-ish cut in the grocery store that I like barely even noticed. And like
that's one of those things. These are one of those movies that like you have to nitpick so hard to have something negative to say about it. And there's a part of me that feels bad, like I know because we're definitely reaching the like the closing of this review. We're definitely getting there because this movie says so much for itself. There's not we could just talk about how bone chilling and disgusting and upsetting it is that this is just another story so similar to what we saw. I will say this much. There was a part of me that like flashed back to mid 2020 when Oscar ends up on the ground that like,
yep.
Again, white guy, I'm never going to have to deal with this in my life. Probably. I could not hear George Floyd's voice saying, "I can't breathe" in the back of my head when they put his like the palm of his hand and like the small of his back, almost like crushing him against the ground. I could not hear that man's voice in my head. And the fact that this movie predates George Floyd's unnecessary, vile, cold-blooded murder by nearly a decade, and retroactively, that scene in this movie feels like it's echoing another tragedy. It's really it's a hard watch, but like you and I said, this is the kind of movie, like a Schindler's List, that when you get to an age where you're capable of understanding a tragedy that happened in our real world and seeing art of it that's so perfectly and in a really unsettling way beautifully captures the entirety of that tragedy and the gravity of it, you have a responsibility to consume that art at least once you are capable of understanding it.
Yeah.
Fruitvale Station is that. You have to, like, you owe it to the world, and you owe it to lived experiences you will not have, to watch this movie and get like a scintilla of understanding of it. Because you can't watch enough movies and understand what it's like to live in a world where the people who have "Protect and Serve" written on their car feel like they're a death squad to people who look like you. Like there's no movie that can teach you how that feels.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's another thing, and it's subtle. When the dog is dying, Oscar can't call 911.
He literally looks around and says, "Help me," and like,
Like,
no one there.
Yeah, and we talked throughout the commentary about like how much we love the cell phone graphic. And I don't know if we, I don't know if
super important.
Yeah, it's very important. And like, he has that cell phone with him. We see him using it. He does not call the cops. Why? Because he doesn't trust them. Because he can't trust them. If that was a white dude, if that was Joe Donut filling up his car, who saw some prick run over this poor dog, white dude, he can make that phone call. He can pick up the phone, call 911, and not immediately have to like start silently praying. This movie is very effective at what it does, and it does what it is what it wants to be perfectly. In some of the ugliest ways. There's not a whole lot more we can say beyond watch this fucking movie today. That's my biggest thing I can say here. And rating this kind of movie is hard to do because of how heavy it is, because of the nature of the material. So yeah, I mean, if I have to, A+, just for the sake of consistency, because it's an amazing piece of art that tells a true story that shouldn't have to be told.
No, I agree. I do think everyone should watch this movie, especially if you're, rather uneducated about this specific event and just like social justice issues across the country, just to gain just like a sliver of perspective, because this is an extreme. It's an extreme, and was an extreme that's a little all too common.
Yeah.
So
it is the worst case scenario that comes to pass with an unsettling amount of frequency.
I'm going to give this movie an A. I don't know if I'll ever give a movie an A+. That's not an ego thing. That's not a challenging thing. It's just like there's always going to be something. Melanie Diaz, who played Oscar's girlfriend, she felt a little flat for me sometimes, like throughout the beginning. I felt like she wasn't listening. I felt like she was just kind of I don't know. I never did not appreciate her character, but I was just kind of like, where is she gonna go? Like, are you important? Because I don't know if you're talking like you're important. Like, I'll see you again. And then, like, I felt like she got better for me throughout the film.
I think it's once she starts to let her guard down around Oscar again, and that like that's a choice
Perhaps.
is made. That like you're just gonna be, because again, and this is something you mentioned in the audio commentary that I want to bring up one more just real quick before we wrap up. The You hear whenever shit like this happens, and I alluded to it earlier. Well, why didn't they comply? Oh, well, they weren't an angel. This, that, the other thing. Like that changes the fact that they were slaughtered for no good reason whatsoever. The fact that the movie shows you the multitudes of Oscar, and the way that it's like, yeah, he isn't necessarily an angel, maybe a victim of circumstance, somebody who's doing what they have to in a not great situation, but not what most people who like to defend these types of murders, who that type of person would call not an angel. And I love that. I love that they go out of their way to be like, this is everything that Oscar is. And the moment that results in his death, he did not a goddamn thing wrong. Like he responsibly stood his ground, tried to do his best to, comply, which makes me gag saying that, but that's, how the situation is presented. There's just so much there that, yeah, you get to see that he was a person. He wasn't a perfect person.
Yeah.
Same way I'm not a perfect person, and you're not, and nobody is. And then when it all comes down to it, the thing that cost him his life had nothing to do with prior arrests. It had nothing to do with the fact that he cheated on his girlfriend. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's making eyes at the girl at the grocery store. Or the fact that he does like one final drug deal. And like it doesn't matter. Like all of these things have nothing to do with what is done to him.
Yeah.
And I think that the movie did a very good job presenting that. But I know what you mean. For me, and I don't know if I've mentioned this at all or not before. For me, when it comes to grading a movie, a lot of it comes down to what is this movie trying to be? Does it succeed at what it's trying to do?
Oh, well then,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, and that's for me. Other people grade stuff on a different, with a different criteria in mind. Oops, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. I accidentally kicked the headphone thing off the table, the little hub with all the headphones plugged into it. But I can still hear me. I can still hear you, and that was a stroke of luck that nothing exploded.
Heck yeah, we'll take it.
Um,
I like to look as like a general audience would perceive. I like to take everything into consideration. Like, could you throw this movie on just to throw a movie on? Yeah, and if you don't know what you're getting into, buckle up. It's going to be tough. It's going to be emotional. You're going to feel a lot of different things. You might not want to feel those things. Ignorance is bliss. Like, I agree with that. But like, if you know what's going on, and then you know the story, you know what it's about, it's a recollection. Does the movie feel like maybe slower at points? Sure, but it's also not an action movie. It's also not like, it is what it is. It's documentation-esque of real events. And like, I think you hit the nail on the head with what it does, what it wants to do. So as far as Fruitvale Station goes, excellent, powerful, well directed, well acted, well written, well well taken care of.
Yeah.
Just like, I feel like everyone on board knew the importance of what they were doing. Like, I could feel that as an audience member. And really important, good, true film. Man, it's hard to talk about it. Like,
It is. With that said, I said at the beginning or at the end of the audio commentary, and I still feel that way. I don't feel super comfy doing the ad read at the end of the show. If you've been around, you know the places. There's a Patreon, and we're on social media, and the Nerd Academy. Type it in, you'll find it.
we'll bring some energy for you next week.
Yeah, next week is Creed, and it'll be a
Much more fun.
easier watch. And I will also publicly humiliate myself here because I know more people will hear this than will hear the audio commentary. It occurred to me halfway through Fruitvale Station that that Ryan Coogler very publicly did not direct Creed 2. And I forgot that he didn't do both movies. So the lineup for Ryan Coogler month now is going to be Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther. So it'll be our first official superhero movie, which is kind of our beat around here anyway. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and Black Lives Matter, defund the police. And we're good. No, we're not. Now we are.
Mm-hmm.
Wait.
Timer's still going.
It is still
If you're
going.